I always believed my family was normal. Maybe not perfect, but close enough. We had dinners together, went on road trips during the summer, and celebrated birthdays with cake and laughter. My mother, especially, was the calm in our storm. She had this gentle smile and warm eyes that made you feel safe, no matter what was going on in the world outside. But one night, one quiet, ordinary night, she leaned in, looked at me with a strange mix of fear and urgency, and whispered something in my ear that shattered every truth I'd ever known. Something I can never unhear. It was late, around 11 p.m. The house was silent, lit only by the glow of a hallway lamp. I was in my room, half asleep, when she knocked on the door. She never came into my room that late, especially not with that expression on her face. There was something in her eyes that felt heavy. Like she was carrying the weight of a secret that had lived too long in silence. She sat at the edge of my bed, took a deep breath, and then, without any warning, said words that flipped my world upside down. I remember blinking, unsure if I had heard her right. My chest tightened. My ears rang. The room didn't feel real anymore. Growing up, I never questioned my parents' relationship. They laughed together. They fought sometimes, sure, but never in a way that raised alarms. But that night, with just a few hushed words, my mother pulled back a curtain I didn't even know existed. She wasn't just talking about betrayal. She was talking about something deeper, something buried for years. Something about love, regret, and decisions that left permanent cracks in people's hearts. What made it worse was the way she looked at me after. Like she needed me to say something, to fix something, but I didn't even know where to start. I sat there frozen, her secret echoing in my ears, over and over again. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just a moment, it was the beginning of a long unraveling. Questions began clawing their way into my mind. Who else knew? Why now? And how much of my life was built on something that was never really true? The days that followed weren't normal. I started noticing things I hadn't before. The tension between my parents during dinner. The way my dad avoided certain topics. The way my mother would sometimes stare out the window, lost in thought, like she was reliving something from years ago. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I was carrying her secret now too, and it was getting heavier by the hour. I thought secrets like this only existed in movies or on someone else's YouTube story. I never imagined it would be mine. And the worst part is, what she told me, it wasn't the full story. It was just the beginning. What she whispered was only a piece of a much larger truth, one that would change not just how I saw my parents, but how I saw myself. February 2nd, the next morning felt different. It wasn't just what my mother had whispered, it was how everything around me suddenly looked unfamiliar. The kitchen felt colder. My father's usual humming while making coffee was missing. And my mother, she wouldn't even look me in the eye. It was like she regretted saying anything, but there was no taking it back. Her words were already stuck in my head, looping over and over, forcing me to question everything I thought I knew about my family. Growing up, I never saw the cracks. My mom was always present, packing lunches, helping with homework, making sure birthdays were special. My dad was busy with work most of the time, but he was there. Not overly affectionate, but steady. They weren't the kind of couple who held hands in public, but I never imagined there was anything broken between them. That was the version of them I knew. Until now. I started digging, not openly, but just observing. Listening more closely. Paying attention to the things I used to brush off. My mother would pause when certain songs played on the radio. My dad's phone would always be face down on the table. There were small things, half sentences, uncomfortable glances, the sudden silence when I walked into a room, that started to add up. And the more I noticed, the more I felt like I was walking through a house full of shadows. At school, I couldn't focus. My friends joked around, talked about weekend plans, but I wasn't really there. I kept wondering what else my mother wasn't telling me. If she had hidden something for this long, what else was buried under the surface? And more than anything, why had she told me now? What made her choose that night, that moment, to finally speak? I wanted to ask her again, press for details, but every time I looked at her, she seemed distant. Not angry, not sad, just somewhere else. Like she had gone back in time and was stuck there. I began to think maybe what she whispered had more to do with her than my dad. Maybe it was a choice she made. Maybe it wasn't about betrayal from him, but from her. And that thought scared me even more. Because if my mother, the person I trusted most, had a side I never saw, then maybe everything I believed about love, loyalty, and family was just a carefully painted lie. A few days later, I finally asked her. Not directly, not what exactly did you mean? But something softer. We were folding laundry together in the living room, the TV playing quietly in the background. I said, "Do you ever think people can make one mistake that changes everything?" She froze for a second. Her hands stopped moving, holding one of my dad's shirts mid-fold. Then, she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Sometimes one moment, one choice, it stays with you forever." That's when I knew it wasn't about him. It was about her. My mother had been holding something for years, and the guilt was still fresh. I wanted to ask her who. When. Why. But I couldn't push her. I was scared. Scared of what I might hear. Scared of how I'd see her afterward. That night, I stayed up late, scrolling through old family photos on my phone. Looking at birthdays, Christmas mornings, beach trips. I kept thinking, was it during this time? Were they pretending through all of this? I started to remember things differently. Like the time she disappeared for a weekend to help her sister. Or the quiet argument I once overheard when I was 13 and thought nothing of. These little pieces started coming together, but they still didn't form the whole picture. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I wasn't just dealing with one secret. There were layers. My dad's coldness wasn't new, but now it felt loaded. Maybe he knew. Maybe he had known for years and chose silence over confrontation. That could explain the strange distance between them. Not hate, but something like quiet survival. Two people living in the same house, raising a family, sharing a past, but no longer connected. Then there was my aunt, my mother's younger sister. They used to be inseparable. Always on the phone, visiting each other. But about 5 years ago, everything changed. Suddenly, they didn't talk anymore. I never asked why. But now, even that felt suspicious. Could she have something to do with this? Was the truth buried in that broken relationship? The walls of my home started to feel thinner. Every look, every pause, every half-finished sentence seemed to hold weight. I wasn't just carrying her secret, I was now part of it. And whatever happened in the past, it wasn't over. Something was still unresolved, still hidden. I could feel it. And I knew, whether I wanted to or not, I was getting closer to uncovering it. One evening, I found my mom sitting alone on the porch. She was staring at the sky, holding a cup of tea that had probably gone cold. I sat beside her, saying nothing at first. The silence between us had grown louder over the past week, filled with questions neither of us knew how to ask. Finally, she spoke. "You ever wish you could go back and undo one conversation? Just take the words back and pretend they never happened?" I didn't answer. I just looked at her and waited. Her eyes were tired, like she hadn't slept in days. The air between us felt heavy. It was clear that whatever she had told me that night wasn't everything. It was only the surface. And now, it seemed like she was trying to decide if she should tell me the rest. But something in her held back, like she was protecting someone, or maybe protecting me. That's when I started to wonder if the secret she whispered had something to do with me. Not just her past, but something that could change how I saw my entire life. Later that night, I went through some old boxes in the storage room. I don't even know what I was looking for. Maybe a clue. A photo. A letter. Something to fill in the blanks she wouldn't speak. At the bottom of one box, I found an old envelope. It wasn't labeled, but inside was a photo, one I had never seen before. My mother was in it, younger, smiling, but the man standing beside her wasn't my father. He had his arm around her, and the way they looked at each other made my heart race. There was a softness in their eyes. A closeness that didn't look casual. My hands were shaking. I flipped the photo over, and there was a small note written in faded ink. Just 2 words and a date. For always. 1999. My parents got married in 2000. My breath caught. Everything started to spin. Could this man be who I thought he might be? Was this the connection? The missing link to her whisper? I wanted to scream, but I couldn't even move. The photo burned in my hands like it was alive. I knew I had to confront her. I couldn't carry this storm in my chest anymore. But I also knew, once I asked, once she answered, there would be no turning back. I held the photo for a long time, staring at it like maybe the truth would speak for itself if I looked hard enough. But it didn't. It just sat there, silent and dangerous, daring me to ask the question I didn't want answered. I waited until the house was quiet. My dad was already asleep, and my mom was in the kitchen rinsing dishes. I walked in, set the photo gently on the counter, and waited for her to turn around. When she did, her eyes dropped to the picture, and for a second, her whole face changed. Her hands stopped moving. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. "Who is he?" I asked, my voice low. "And why do you still have this?" She didn't respond right away. Instead, she leaned on the counter like her knees were giving up. Then she whispered, almost too soft to hear, "You weren't supposed to find that." I wanted to yell, to demand the truth, but something about her voice kept me still. Finally, she looked up. "His name was Marcus," she said. "He was someone I loved before your father." I thought it was over. I thought I moved on. I could tell this wasn't just an old romance. It meant more. And something in her eyes said it wasn't just about love. I waited. She sat down and motioned for me to do the same. "You were right to feel something's been wrong," she said. "And I've tried for years to keep everything together. But Marcus came back a few years ago." My heart dropped. "He reached out," she continued. "It wasn't supposed to go anywhere. But sometimes old feelings don't stay buried." I felt like the floor under me disappeared. My voice cracked. "Are you saying, did you cheat on Dad?" She didn't say yes. But she didn't say no either. And that silence said more than any confession could. I felt my stomach twist. This wasn't just about her mistake years ago. It was something recent. Something that had been quietly sitting behind every dinner, every birthday, every holiday. And then came the second blow. She took a breath, hesitated, then said, "There's more. The photo, the man in it. Marcus, there's a chance he might be your biological father." I couldn't breathe. The words hit harder than anything I imagined. It wasn't just a love triangle or an affair. It was my identity. My story. Everything I believed about who I was. She reached for my hand, but I pulled back. I needed air. I needed space. I needed time. But deep down, I knew time wouldn't fix this. Because now, the question wasn't just what she did, it was who I really was. And whether the truth would heal the wound, or make it permanent. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay there staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. Everything I thought I knew about myself, about my family, had cracked open in a matter of minutes. My mother's voice, trembling and full of regret, kept replaying in my head. "There's a chance he might be your biological father." That word, chance, was like a hook stuck in my chest. What did it even mean? Had she never told anyone? Had she kept this from my father too? The next morning, I left the house before anyone woke up. I walked for hours, trying to decide what to do. Every step I took felt heavier. I knew I couldn't ignore this. I needed answers. Not just from her, but from him. Marcus. The man in the photo. The man who might be my real father. By noon, I was sitting in my aunt's living room. The same aunt who hadn't spoken to my mother in years. She looked surprised to see me, but when I told her why I came, her face went pale. I showed her the photo. Her hands trembled as she held it. "You deserve to know the truth," she said, finally. "Your mom wasn't the only one keeping this secret." And that's when everything unraveled. She told me that back in the late 90s, my mom had been in love with Marcus, madly in love. But he wasn't ready for a family. He left, breaking my mom's heart. A few months later, she met my dad. He was stable, kind, and ready to settle down. She never told him she was already pregnant. She married him before anyone could question the timing. My aunt only found out years later and confronted her, which is why they stopped talking. "She thought she was protecting you," my aunt said softly. "She thought it was best." That night, I went home and looked at my dad differently. I watched him laugh at something on the news, completely unaware of the storm swirling behind him. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I told him everything. At first, he didn't believe me. Then he just went quiet. I've never seen his face look like that, shocked, hurt, but almost not surprised. And then, the twist I never saw coming. He stood up, walked to his study, and came back with an envelope. "I've known," he said. "Since the day you were born. The timing didn't add up. I got a paternity test when you were a baby. I just never said anything. Because I chose you. And I chose her. Even if she didn't choose me first." My breath caught. I didn't know whether to cry or scream. He had known all along, and loved me anyway. The truth was out. The pain was real. But in that moment, standing between the people who raised me and the man I might never meet, I realized something. Family isn't just about blood. It's about who stays. After everything was out in the open, the silence in our home changed. It wasn't the same cold, quiet distance, it was something heavier, but honest. For the first time, we weren't pretending. My dad didn't say much for a couple of days. He just moved through the house like someone who had been holding his breath for years and was finally letting it out. My mother kept to herself too. I could tell she was scared that everything was going to fall apart. But something unexpected happened. We didn't break. Instead, we slowly began to talk. I sat down with my mom one afternoon, and this time, I was ready to listen, not just to the facts, but to her heart. She told me how hard it had been to carry the secret. How she had lived every day fearing it would all come crashing down. She told me that even though Marcus had left her, even though she had never planned to hide the truth, she just wanted to give me a real family. She chose to give me a father, even if he wasn't the one by blood. But in doing that, she had to sacrifice her own truth. My dad and I also had a quiet conversation. He said something that will stay with me forever. "I knew I wasn't your biological father, but I never felt like a stranger to you. From the first time I held you, I made a promise to be your father. And I kept it." That hit me deeper than anything else. In the end, the real betrayal wasn't in the secret. It was in how long it took for the truth to come out. But what mattered more was how we dealt with it after. I decided not to reach out to Marcus, not yet, maybe not ever. My curiosity was there, of course, but my loyalty, it stayed with the people who stood by me. My mother and aunt also reconnected. They talked for hours one night, and I saw them hug for the first time in years. The wound between them hadn't healed completely, but something had started to mend. There was still love there, buried beneath all the pain. In the weeks that followed, we slowly returned to something close to normal. Not the old normal, but a new one. One built on truth. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. We laughed more, even if the laughter felt different now. A little wiser. A little more aware of how fragile everything is. This story isn't just about infidelity or betrayal, it's about forgiveness, about the strength of chosen love, and about how families can bend without fully breaking. What my mother whispered that night changed everything. But it also gave us the chance to rebuild, this time with no lies between us. Sometimes, the truth hurts. But sometimes, it sets you free. And in the end, that's what mattered most. 60.